with. Let's bring in a pair of conservatives with distinctly different points of view, Andrew Sullivan and Christopher Hitchens. Good to see both of you. So, Christopher, at a time...
Not a conservative.
Our pleasure. At a time when the American public...
No, wait, you didn't hear not a conservative.
Not a conservative.
No, thank you.
How would you characterize yourself?
Well, I have no party affiliation and no ideological one, but I'm no kind of conservative.
All right. Well, let's find more about how you specifically feel about this war. We know that Americans are overwhelmingly opposed to this war and its prosecution. And you've got a bunch of Republicans. Well, our statistics show that. And the question I want to ask you, when you've got a bunch of Republicans running away from the president who are in tight races, why do you think the president picked now to pledge his support for the vice president and the defense secretary before this election?
Well, like almost everything he said this week, what the president has said strikes me as rather weird. Vice President Cheney holds his office by grace of the electorate, who chose him as vice president, but he doesn't hold his office by presidential fiat or permission. So we already knew that he'd be vice president till the next time around. As for Secretary Rumsfeld, you could either change the policy and keep the same defense secretary, or you could have the same defense secretary and not change the policy, or have a different defense secretary and keep the same policy. The things are completely interchangeable.
Do you think they're both doing a fantastic job, as the president said?
Well, the word fantastic relates to fantasy, doesn't it? I mean, to say that something is fantastic or fabulous is to say that it's imaginary. So
is that what you're saying it is?
I think it is in the president's mind, yes, just as he's imagined that John Kerry insulted the men and women in uniform when he was trying to make a joke at the president's expense. As I say, it's been a weird and grotesque week, not least rhetorically.
Andrew Sullivan, did the president make a mistake, and will that drive some of these voters away from Republicans in a tight contest?
Well, look, here's a president who said that Michael Brown was doing a heck of a job with Katrina. And now he's a president saying that Donald Rumsfeld has done a fantastic job in Iraq. It's the same denial. If you believe that Michael Brown did a heck of a job with Katrina, then you maybe believe that Donald Rumsfeld has done a great job in Iraq. It's unhinged. In my view, it suggests this man has lost his mind. I mean, no one objectively can look at the way this war has been conducted, whether you were for it, as I was, or against it, and see that it's been done well. It's a disaster. And for him to say it's a fantastic job suggests this president really has lost it. I'm sorry, there is no other way to say it.
Christopher, I see you smiling subtly as Andrew said that. Are you going to go that far out on a limb? The president's lost his marbles by pledging his support?
The nicest way I've ever heard it put by people who do admire the president and who know him a little, which I do not, is to say that one of his great vices, which can masquerade as a virtue, is that of loyalty. He's not very good at getting rid of people. Look how long he took to get rid of George Tenet, for example, and even then, rather than tell him he was fired or should be impeached for his incompetence, gave him a Medal of Freedom, I suppose to try and make him feel better. Gave a Medal of Freedom to Paul Bremer, universally agreed to have been a calamitous viceroy in Baghdad. It's an odd thing, but the president seems to be soft, Andrew would say, in the head, too.
I would say what this shows to voters, and should tell anybody, is that if you think Katrina was a success, Iraq is now Katrina. Iraq is the foreign policy version of Katrina.
Well,
and this president cannot handle the reality. And so we have to, this is not an election anymore, it's an intervention. This man is so in denial, we need to intervene.
So, Andrew, do you think the Republicans deserve to lose control over Congress over this one single issue of Iraq?
Yes. Someone has to finally be held accountable. I mean, I know these people don't want to hold anybody accountable, but the Secretary of Defense is accountable. The President is accountable. John Boehner is wrong. It is not the military generals who are to blame for this. It is the President, the Commander-in-Chief. He gets the credit if he wins. He takes the blame if he fails. He has failed. And voters must take that into account.
And Christopher, who do you blame?
I don't, by the way, see from what you've just transmitted that John Boehner did say anything of the sort, and the attempt by the Dean people to intervene here is an attempt, obviously, to equalize the farcical mess into which John Kerry's got himself by apologizing when he shouldn't have done. But not to avoid your question,
but he did, John Boehner, make it very clear, and Wolf just aired part of that now, quote, that the generals on the ground are in charge, and then he suggested with the help of Secretary Rumsfeld.
Well, that's certainly to an extent true, and after all, the generals are allowed, if they want you, to call for the more troops that some people say, or not if they don't want to. I mean, yes, of course, they aren't absolved of responsibility.
But this has been their line from the beginning. It's always blame the generals, blame the troops. Why can't they take responsibility for their own mistakes, ever? I mean, that's the question. Since when is it conservative not to take responsibility for their own actions?
There I agree with you. That's why I mentioned the Tenet case, where it seemed to be scandalous the guy was allowed to stay one day after September the 11th, after leaving us defenseless under open skies, let alone to be given a medal. Nobody complained. No one in Congress complained either. I mean, no one in the press actually complained, if it comes to that.
Today, Richard Pearl, one of the chief neoconservatives, has said that this administration is dysfunctional. Okay? Read Woodward's book. These people are dysfunctional right now, and the electorate has no choice but to try and hold them accountable for their actions.
That's true, Andrew, but the problem is that when people think, okay, how do I register this accountability in my own name as a voter, they're confronted with a sort of seedy, shady, confused, demoralized Democratic Party.
Well, that may be true. On the other hand, they didn't create this mess, did they?
So let's talk about another big mess that John Kerry has on his hands. I know, Andrew, that you feel far too much time has been spent on this on the airwaves over the last 24 hours or so. But the Republicans are now telling us they think that the controversy alone could increase voter turnout by 1%. Will that sink some Democrats in tight races?
Kerry did the right thing today, I think. I disagree with Christopher. I think I agree with Christopher, actually, that Kerry probably didn't mean what it sounded, but he just sort of got off his high horse a news cycle earlier for the sake of the Democrats. I think this is over now. I really do, and I think it's time to move on to the real issues. We have abandoned an American soldier to the Shiite militias in Baghdad. Where is he? Since when does the commander-in-chief abandon a U.S. soldier to the enemy? When are we going to hold this man accountable for doing that instead of parsing the words of someone who is not even on the ballot?
But, Christopher, at the end of the day, is it meaningful at all what John Kerry said on Election Day? Will it change votes?
I don't remember anything being as shamelessly distorted as Kerry's hapless attempt to tell a feeble joke about Bush's IQ, but it seems to be quite Nixonian what the White House and the Republican Party's been doing. It's self-evident that Kerry wouldn't have tried to equate stupidity with military service, and it's an attempt to change the subject in the crummiest way. I agree with Andrew. It's almost degrading to have to discuss it, but since we are doing so, I think that's what ought to be said. It's an attempt to, it looks like it's talking about Iraq when it's not.
All right, you said it will change the subject. Very brief answer, though. You still haven't answered the question whether you think it'll change any votes.
Oh, well, I just went on a conservative talk show, radio show, where they said they were getting a huge number of emails, I don't think they were making it up, from service people and their families, really steamed, who really did think that Kerry had meant them by his klutziness. And if that is true, then it will outlive Andrew's attempt to put it down.
Well, gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there. Andrew Sullivan, Christopher Hitchens. Christopher, we will more